Hello and welcome to this edition of Tennessee Concrete Conversations, a podcast created by the Tennessee Concrete Association. Today's topic is concrete driveways, especially residential driveways, as well as any other exterior concrete that you may install at your home. Many people believe that such concrete is covered by the building code, but that is normally not the case. In Tennessee, the code under which your home is constructed will vary from area to area. Many jurisdictions in Tennessee are currently using the International Residential Code version 2015. Some may be on a little bit later version of the code, the IRC 2018. Neither of these codes provide specific instructions for exterior concrete. The building codes only deal with concrete that is included inside the drip line of your home. So foundations, basement walls, floor slabs, concrete slabs. There is some guidance in the code, some requirements for those type of applications. But the IRC code is silent on concrete that exists outside of the drip line of your house, so driveways, patios, and sidewalks. There is a detailed code for residential concrete that can be found in the American Concrete Institute ACI 332. This is the residential code for concrete, and the IRC references this for all concrete inside the home. So this morning we're going to talk about those requirements that are in ACI 332 for concrete outside your home. ACI 332 is designed to provide guidance on how you can get durable concrete that will serve for many years without damage. ACI 332 looks at the exposure conditions for concrete, and from that tells us what mixes need to be specified or used in order to achieve durable concrete. It's really important to understand that Tennessee, literally from Memphis to Mountain City, is in the most severe freeze-thaw zone. Freeze-thaw cycles can do damage to concrete, and we know how to protect concrete from this kind of damage. It starts with using the right concrete mix. So if we look at ACI 332-20, which is the most recent version of the residential code for concrete, here's what we find in terms of the requirements for concrete mixtures to be used on residential driveways. The first is the strength requirement for your concrete. According to ACI 332, concrete should be 4,500 psi. Now, let me say at the outset that this is not really a question of concrete strength. 4,500 psi is very strong, and you don't need that level of strength for your driveway. But strength and durability are closely correlated. So this requirement is not about strength, rather it is about durability. So 4,500 psi with a maximum water cement ratio of 0.45. Now that's a little bit technical, and you really shouldn't have to worry too much about that. You order concrete typically by the strength. So if you order a 4,500 psi concrete, it's very likely that the water cement ratio will be at that 0.45. Another really important thing when you order concrete, or you have your contractor order concrete as they install your driveway, All exterior concrete needs to be air entrained. So air entrainment was developed many, many years ago, and it is concrete's primary defense against damage from those freeze-thaw cycles. It consists of literally billions, with a B, billions of bubbles per cubic yard. Now, these are microscopic bubbles. You can't see them if you look at the concrete, but those bubbles act as an internal pressure relief system. So when the moisture in the concrete begins to freeze, before it can generate detrimental hydraulic pressure inside the concrete, those tiny air bubbles provide a pressure relief system so that the pressure generated by the formation of ice inside the concrete does not damage the concrete. So air entrainment is absolutely your first line of defense, and you should have an air entrainment percentage of around 6% according to ACI 332. This is normal for concrete in Tennessee. It is not difficult for ready-mix producers to do, and in fact they do it all the time for exterior concrete. But it is something you want to make sure is included when you talk with your contractor. There are some other specific requirements in ACI 332, but those are the three big ones. The first is you need to have your contractor order 4,500 PSI concrete with air entrainment, and that air entrainment should be around 6%. In some parts of the state, it's very common to use concrete of 3,000 or maybe 3,500 PSI for driveways. Again, this is not an issue of strength or load bearing. This is an issue for durability. Other keys to get good, durable concrete around your home are to make sure that there's good workmanship, and that starts with the subgrade. So what's underneath the concrete? All concrete rests on the ground or on some type of subgrade material, maybe a gravel base, and that subgrade needs to be uniformly compacted. So if you're putting in a new driveway and you're stripping off some grass, perhaps the grass, the sod, any of that kind of thing needs to be removed. You never want to place concrete on grass or sod. And if there are any soft spots in the area where you want to place your concrete, those should also be removed. And the area needs to be uniformly compacted. Sometimes that can mean the installation of a gravel base, but that's not always necessary. A gravel base does provide good uniform compaction. The base itself, the gravel that's installed, should be compacted with something like a plate compactor. So this is a tool that vibrates, and then you run it across your area that you filled with gravel, and it compacts that gravel so there's no settlement. That's really good practice for most residential concrete. The thickness of the concrete should be at least 3.5 inches. And that's typically what we see. Many residential contractors will use a 2x4 to form concrete. That 2x4 has a nominal thickness of 3.5 inches. So that's typically what we see. But in some cases, you will see concrete that is placed at less than 3.5 inches thick, and that's not appropriate. So 3.5 to 4 inches thick for most driveways is fine. That concrete will have plenty of strength, plenty of load carrying capacity for cars and pickup trucks. So the vehicles that you plan to park on your driveway, that 3.5 to 4 inches thickness is fine. In addition to ordering the right mix to start with, it's very important that the concrete be placed, finished, and cured in accordance with long-standing industry practices. So one of the key things here is that the concrete should be struck off. That's our first step to get it level, then bull floated. And then we want to make sure that the installer, the contractor, doesn't do anything to the concrete while there is bleed water on the surface. Bleed water occurs in almost all concrete mixes. It's a natural part of the process. So some of the water in the concrete will come to the top. That's because water is the lightest thing that we put into a concrete mix. And that bleed water needs to come to the top and then evaporate before we do any additional finishing to the surface. If we trowel that water back into the surface by finishing too early or by using the wrong tool, it will cause problems such as dusting, something that we call crazing, and it can lead to additional cracking in the concrete. So the finishing process is crucial. One of the ways you can determine if an individual contractor has a commitment to quality is to look at work that they've performed for other people. I think this is your best protection. You should always ask for references, and you should ask for references for the same type of work that you are contemplating. So if you're putting in a driveway, you want to see references for other driveways that this contractor or this firm has performed, and you should go look at those. That is your best protection. And if you see something in the workmanship that you don't like or that you don't think is right, then that needs to be addressed before you hire the contractor, certainly before you pay any money and before you allow them to do work on your property or around your home. Very, very important. Another thing you can check for is to see if the contractor, the installer, has any type of certifications related to the installation of concrete. The most common certification for concrete flat work is from the American Concrete Institute. There is a specific certification for people who perform flat work, and it's called the ACI Flat Work Finisher Certification. Our organization, the Tennessee Concrete Association, does this training and administers this exam across Tennessee, but it is a national standard. And if you have a contractor who moved here from someplace else and they have that certification, then they should know the correct process to ensure that the concrete on your home is installed correctly and that it is durable. So that's a good thing to ask for, and sometimes that can be a way for you to determine or to make a choice between different contractors. The other thing that's very, very important for the satisfactory performance of concrete is curing. And unfortunately, this is often a step that is ignored or left out, especially for residential concrete. So curing is, there's several ways we can successfully cure concrete. But once the concrete has been placed and properly finished, we need to ensure that the concrete, especially at the surface, does not dry out. It's critical that we maintain water, moisture in the concrete, especially at the surface, because that's what allows concrete to continue to gain strength and to gain more durability. So protecting the surface from moisture loss after the concrete has been placed and finished, and typically for a concrete driveway, that would be a broom finish. What we do next is very, very important. And in many cases, what comes next is essentially nothing. There's no provision made for curing, and this ensures that the concrete can never reach its full potential. So curing can be done a number of different ways. The most practical for residential concrete is probably the application of a curing or a cure and seal compound on the surface. This can be done with pressurized sprayers. It's pretty easy to execute. There's lots of good products out there that are typically called cure and seals. They are acrylic-based materials, and what they do is form basically a thin sheet of plastic on top of your concrete. That plastic helps hold the moisture in the surface, which is very important, and it will give you some protection for probably a year or so against things trying to get into your concrete. In other words, it will block things like salt or other chemicals from penetrating into your concrete. So this is easy to do, and it's just critical for concrete to reach its full potential. Another big issue is proper jointing in concrete. We know that concrete will crack. That's actually a predictable part of the material. And we know there's industry guidance for the spacing of joints to control those cracks. So when we either saw cut or tool joints into fresh concrete, we're telling the concrete, hey, we want you to crack here and we want you to crack in a straight line. And that joint then allows the concrete to move without further cracking. So proper jointing is very, very important. That's one of the topics that is covered in the certification that I mentioned earlier. Once the concrete has been installed and cured, how you care for your concrete is also important. The proper maintenance will help ensure that you get many years of good service from your concrete. So one of the things that is important for everyone to understand is how concrete can be damaged by the application of de-icing chemicals. In the old days, we often used rock salt, and rock salt can increase the potential for damage to concrete, but the salt itself doesn't directly attack the concrete. Today, however, if you go to your local hardware store to purchase a de-icer, it may have some salt in it, but it almost certainly has some other chemicals. And those chemicals can actually aggressively attack even good quality concrete. So it's very important, if you use those chemicals, to use them per the instructions. And those instructions will tell you not to overuse, and then they will also tell you to remove the de-icing chemical after the ice is melted, which almost never happens. If you're going to use de-icing chemicals, I believe it is critical that you take an additional step to protect your concrete. And that additional step would be the application of a penetrating sealer, probably 12 months after your concrete has been placed, or roughly a year. Penetrating sealers are based on chemicals called silanes, S-I-L-A-N-E, or sometimes a blend of silane and siloxane. And they work a little bit differently than the acrylic-based sealers that we often use for curing. The silanes actually penetrate into the concrete and create an internal shield, so that when we apply salt or other de-icers, and that is that salt or that de-icer becomes diluted or saturated with moisture, instead of that penetrating into our concrete, these sealers will repel that so that it doesn't get inside the concrete and attack the glue that holds your concrete together. And in today's world, where the use of de-icing chemicals is pretty common in most parts of Tennessee, the application of that silane or that penetrating sealer, I think, is a crucial step to protect your concrete. So that's a quick overview of what you should do if you're constructing a new concrete driveway or having one constructed. Make sure you order the correct mix. Again, that's a 4,500 PSI. And a lot of your contractors will say that they use something other than a 4,500 PSI. But for durability, it's important to start with the right mix. So 4,500 PSI with air entrainment, proper finishing, no finishing operation while bleed water is present on the surface, good curing after the concrete has been broomed or otherwise finished, and then you should strongly consider the application of a penetrating sealer at about 12 to maybe 14 months after the concrete has been constructed. If you have additional questions, more information is available on our Tennessee Concrete website, which is tnconcrete.org. We hope you found this helpful, and we encourage you to check back for the next episode of Tennessee Concrete Conversations.